No matter what we say, it's very difficult for people to provide honest feedback in a manner that is constructive. So I've been working on that for years, and I always prided in the fact that, well, I'm able to do that. What I've learned, though, is that that's not what's important. What is important is...
Welcome to the Unconventional Leadership Podcast, where we help you unlock your potential as a leader. Well, thank you for joining this week's episode of the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. I have the distinct pleasure today to be with Sharmili Reddy, a dear friend, a colleague, a longtime client of Talent Magnet Institute. And it's such a pleasure to have you as a loyal listener of our podcast for many years now.
Thank you for having me, Mike. I have been listening for a long time, and it's unbelievable. I'm here now talking about my journey and my experience.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. It's always, for us, the journeys of individuals is what's so awesome to see and experience, right? Knowing that those individuals have teams that they're leading and people who are behind them and community initiatives that they're advancing forward. And you're an incredible leader. Everyone who knows you, who's been around you for the decades plus that we have, you're an amazing leader. So it's an honor to have you in this studio.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
So let's talk a little bit about your learnings the last few years in your leadership role and some of the greatest ahas or moments of reflection that you might be able to share with our audience. And then we'll unpack those to talk about how we got there.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, as everybody says, it's just such a journey of self-reflection and self-awareness and trying to really think about those experiences where you've been totally uncomfortable because of some reason, and learning from it and growing from it just personally, but then also all the time thinking about how do you help your team kind of grow in that same fashion. So for me, I'll just give a quick example of one thing that has been an aha moment for me is I've always been a very honest leader. So I can sit across from you and I can tell you where you need to improve exactly. Just put it out there. And I always thought that's great that I'm able to do that, because it's very difficult for people to do that.
Yeah.
No matter what we say, it's very difficult for people to provide honest feedback in a manner that is constructive.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I've been working on that for years, and I always prided in the fact that, well, I'm able to do that. What I've learned, though, is that that's not what's important. What is important is how is the person sitting across the table from you taking it. Some people can take that honest feedback the way you give it. And for other people, it doesn't. It just does not. So I've kind of adapted my style a little bit to figure out first, have I built that relationship with the person sitting across from me enough that when I do offer that honest feedback in a manner that connects with them, that they are taking it the way it should. So it's just things like that over time has evolved for me. I still provide honest feedback, but I figure out what is the best mechanism to provide it, how to provide it, how are they going to take it, and is it going to be constructive for them? So it's certainly been an interesting journey, and Talent Magnet has been a huge part of that journey for me the last several years. But again, it's a journey; it never stops.
It never stops. Were there certain points in time where you had that reflection? You used the word adaptive leadership, which I love. Were there certain points in time where you had the reflection of, oh, like a light bulb just went off in your mind? Because as you said, being direct and giving honest feedback, we wish more people would do that. But you noticed that you were using a strength, and it may have needed an additional complement to make it even resonate more with the people you were leading and guiding and giving that feedback to. So was there a point in time where that light bulb went off about, I need to work on some additional relationship building to make sure the trust is there so that when I give the feedback, it's heard for all that it's meant to be heard for?
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a more recent, I'd say in the last 3 or 4 year journey for me. That's when I have realized this. And the moment that it really struck is, again, just as every other leader, I'm trying to be more self-aware of how people are reacting to what I'm saying, what's their body language, and what is the response that they're giving, and do I think that they really agree or disagree? And so I feel like let me give you an example of when it really clicked for me. Is I was doing one of Talent Magnet Institute's podcasts, and there was a episode that talked about 2x2s. And I think every leader wants feedback, but I think we can recognize that it is very difficult, one, to give feedback, but then when you're sitting across from your manager or your supervisor, it is 10 times harder to say, Mike, you really need to fix this. Not 90% of the folks aren't just going to do it.
Right.
So the 2x2, when I was doing that, when I was just listening to that, it is just such a structured format to give to somebody and say, hey, you give me some feedback, I'll give you some feedback, and we'll work on it together. It's not going to be just me working on it. It's not just going to be you working on it. We're going to work on it together and figure out what each of us needs to bring to the table to make this work for both of us. And so that tool for me was critical when I have used it with certain team members to really get to the point of sitting across from each other and saying, you could tone down your personality just a little bit. You come across too strong sometimes. And to me, when people have given me that feedback and I'm able to reflect on it, and after I get past the initial, oh my gosh, that's insane. I didn't think I had a strong personality, but I guess I do. And so I think those have been really important for me throughout my career.
That's wonderful. Yeah. And that, again, we've been talking a lot about self-awareness for a reason. We've been talking a lot about change management for a reason, because what we're feeling, we're all in a constant state of change. We're all in a constant state of needing a little bit more awareness. And the fact that you notice that and then you open yourself up to it, right? Being self-aware is one thing. Being self-aware to the point that you're willing to understand the impact we have on others because we're self-aware. Like, there are people who can be self-aware and not be compassionate and empathetic about, like, it is, well, great, I know exactly how I come across, and I could care less how I reach others, right? But the next level of self-awareness is, I really care how I impact others. Doesn't mean that at points it won't be painful and challenging. But as a leader, the more self-aware we are, where we understand what we're about to do and how it's going to impact others, actually enables us to mobilize our team in a very different way and increase the effectiveness of the organization. So that's organizational effectiveness, which sounds like just a big, broad term. But at the end of the day, it's all about that behavior change, that connectivity, that the trust building, the camaraderie that can happen, and the impact. And that's what we've seen with the organization that you lead. Your team has even given us feedback. I remember specifically a quote, and the quote read, "I have never worked for a leader who has cared this much about my professional development." And they were directing that to you as the leader, right? Sharmili cares about my development. I've never been in an environment that cared so much about my development. That's profound. That's really profound. So thank you for caring about the development of others.
Oh my gosh, I think just as any leader will say, we have an amazing team that is willing to learn, that is willing to grow. And that's something we talk about all the time is I can put a performance evaluation in front of somebody 100 times and it can mean nothing. It can mean nothing unless you as a leader, a team member, wants to reflect, wants to understand what is it that you can do as a professional to grow. And I think a lot of our team members understand that moving up is not just about the technical skills. That sometimes is much easier to teach than the non-technical stuff. So we focus a lot of our time and energy and resource, thankfully supported by our board, to really grow people in that qualitative space that is hard to measure in a short time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can see it over time.
Absolutely.
And the rate of I use all types of analogies. So one of those is you can, the getting the flywheel spinning in that specific area, focusing on the harder skills, which is the soft skills, the rate of change and impact, it just speeds up, right? It's one of the things we love about setting foundational rocks as quarterly goals, because when your team is moving towards quarterly objectives, not just an annual goal that's really broad that we hope we aspire to achieve by the end of the year, but as we look at quarterly rocks, you all of a sudden start experiencing accomplishment, which accomplishment begets additional accomplishment and gets people motivated and locked in and secured. I remember having the opportunity to present with your team and seeing, we did an exercise around goal setting. And what I found so profound was that in that session and in that experience, your team noticed how much they need each other to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And it was, again, these profound moments. Every organization that feels that tension internally from a, call it the proverbial corporate words of silos and barriers and walls, when you break those out and say, at the end of the day, we are all on the same team, right? At PDSKC, we are all on the same team. And that exercise was so profound because of how wanted and needed everyone really is. And this is any organization, but you're working on those things, that's the profound part of leadership. Yourself and Nicole Cullum and your whole team, like, you're working on this, and you're making substantial effort that I wish everyone listening had the opportunity to work for a leader in an organization like yours. Because some are stuck. Some feel stuck. There's not this extra level of self-awareness from a leadership perspective. And this is what working as a team and team building and creating trust and creating an environment, we're seeing it real time unfold. So it's just an honor to be alongside of it.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. The one thing I do want to say about that, to your point, is that this has to be intentional. It really has to be intentional in terms of how your team is supported in developing their soft skills. How are you being intentional about bringing your team together around certain core values or mission or vision or things like that? It doesn't just happen.
Right.
It doesn't just happen. And one of the things for us that we recognized early on is that we need somebody from the outside to come and help us. Sometimes when you're saying the same message over and over again, and again, you're self-aware that you're doing it, but it's just not clicking. Yeah. Why is it not clicking? And can we just bring some external resources in to help us hone that message, to get people around a common vision and value? And I feel like that's where Talent Magnet coming in with different resources, and our different teams needed different kinds of help, and then bring everybody together around certain things. That is what really helped us move forward as a team. The other thing we also recognized early on is that if we really put resources into our leadership team, get our leadership team together and sort of around the same values, it'll trickle down to the staff. So where you start, where you end, sometimes it has to be both based on where your team is. All that is really important to reflect and figure out what that path is for your organization.
Yeah. Extremely profound. This point, the word intentional is underestimated. It really is. So people can say, I'm in conversations all the time with leadership teams, and it always, it astounds me how few take the extra intentional efforts. and who blame it on initiatives and projects and timelines and objectives. And we were in a conversation recently where we debriefed after the session and said, how can we help the teams we just heard speak recognize from a leadership level? Because we know the team is hungry for it. But the leadership is like, now's just not the right time, maybe in 18 months. And our team's debrief session, if our client could hear the debrief, which is part of what I'm trying to work through, how do we make sure we deliver this to the client? There will never not be an initiative, a timeline, and a project plan because you're leading an organization, right? It's always going to be the case. At some point, we have to say, let's take an additional approach to add to the work we're doing and bring this additional effectiveness and then measure it. Let's measure it. Let's challenge our impact of being that intentional leader. And I think we just heard what you said is being intentional takes things up a level and creates a different experience so you can lead differently, but it first starts with the leadership team. So I'm trying to break this down because I don't want, there are some people who go, I wish my leaders were intentional. And I would say every leader's trying to be intentional. They just may be intentional on some things and not as intentional on others. Everyone wants a highly effective team. But it's what are the extra steps we're doing to be even more effective, right? And it's hard to trust that over maybe a 2, 3, 4 year period, it's going to change and adjust. But there is that trust factor of hearing organizations who are doing it to go, oh, so we're currently flying here. You mean we could go to here if we did this intentional effort? Yes, that's exactly what we mean. And there's never a good time. Never a good time.
Time is always a challenge, no matter what organization you're leading, what company you're leading. Time is always the challenge. But again, if you just focus on the fact that if you just spent that little bit of time today for better results tomorrow, then it'll all be worth it. And it's the same for us too. So we are primarily a regulatory agency. So we have customers, residents, businesses that are relying on us to get their job started externally. And so we don't have time for these things either, but we know that if we just circle around our core values of service and integrity and actively talk about those things, that we know that ultimately it's going to help the customer get their permit quicker. And so we do intentionally try to spend as much time as we possibly can on these things. Now, again, it's not as much as we want, but if we don't spend time today on it, it's going to affect our business tomorrow.
Yeah. So I remember very distinctively in 2018, when 2018 feels like, it feels like more than 10 years ago. We're not quite even at 10 years yet. But when we spend 5 years of launching, 2018, no, it's 7 years since launching our podcast. Yeah.
That's right.
That's impressive. That's really interesting. Thank you for being on this journey with us for 7 years. And thank you for being on this journey with us for 7 years. So I remember when we first launched the podcast, there were 3 people who were very intentional about sharing with me some of the learnings and outcomes, and that they were even listening. Because when you put out a podcast, you don't even know, are people listening? But you would share that you were listening while you were running, while you were working out, you were listening to the podcast, and you were giving positive affirmation to us of like, keep it up. This is great work. Could you share with our viewers today some of the other learnings or experiences that you've heard throughout episodes that have stood out to you? Are there or anything that you heard that helped further put you on this journey of next level leadership, unconventional leadership?
Well, there's so many of that, Mike. And what's interesting to me about the podcast is that I had never been a podcast person. It just never connected with me, that just wasn't my style of learning and listening. I am a book person, so I like to read. And so this was something new for me. And what really connected with me was you had people on your podcast that I had heard of in the region, that I knew and that I looked up to. And suddenly it was, oh my gosh, I'm listening to Candace McGraw and our airport CEO talk about leadership and being one of the very few women CEOs in the US and her journey. And suddenly it just started clicking with me. And Dan Hurley and talking about just being an authentic human being. And again, somebody that I really look up to. And so there have been so many instances along the way. It's still my only podcast that I
I
listen
feel so
to.
honored. Oh, that's amazing.
But again, it's because of the connection to some of the people, to connect the connection to you and listening to you and all these nuances and these tidbits that you offer. Just like everybody else, I think a lot of these things we know, but we need a mechanism to keep it on the forefront for us. We get so busy with our lives and all our commitments and the things that we have to do at home and at work and our community that it's easy to forget what's important and why we're here. And I feel like your podcast, that's what it does for me. Is it's a constant reminder of, why am I doing this? What is important to me? What are my values? Why do I believe in these things? And why do I want to spend my energy on these things? So I think your podcast really bring that out for me, the deep within, the why.
Wow. That's awesome. Thank you. That is, when we rebranded from the Talent Magnet Institute podcast, very creative name, definitely focused on building our company brand. And we even set out, I remember early on, Dr. Janet Reed saying that writing a book or launching a brand element like a podcast, let's start there as we launch Talent Magnet Institute, because we'll see the early adoption. So if we are core in again, Dr. Janet Reed was one of our board members, one of our founding board members, along with some just amazing leaders like Karen Crone and David Kynell and Tony Schweier and Doug Bolton and Dr. Janet Reed. And the feedback was, if we release a brand around conversations that are true to our values and what we want to do to change the world, and we take the conversations that we know we have the distinct honor and privilege of having conversations like this, of knowing leaders who are willing to say yes to these dialogues. Let's connect those two elements. Let's push this out in the world and let's see how the world responds. And that's what we did when we set off. And let's say, I think my first podcast recording of an episode was with Tim Hanner, longtime friend, mentor, call it Sherpa, guide, best buddy and pal, who's been with me. I was just talking to him last Monday, just been with me on this journey of work and life and just leadership. I admire leaders like him so much, admire Tim so much. And then we released our first episode that came out was with Dr. Karen Bankston, who also said yes. I remember my first 5 invites to Dr. Karen Bankston, Jim Samaki, Tim Hanner, Jennifer McClure, and I believe Daniel Wechter. And they all said yes. And then asked, so what are we going to be doing? I said, I have no idea. We're just going to have conversations. Oh, and they said yes still, right? And it wasn't until episode 13 where we were actually able to listen to the first episodes, because we started recording and building inventory. And then you're building inventory going, I hope the product's even decent. And I hope people will listen. Again, your encouragement, my friend Craig Todd's encouragement, my friend Jordan Huizinga's encouragement said, at least I have 3 really great friends listening. And I'm going to keep speaking to you as the audience, because you're the kind of leaders we want to be able to just encourage and inspire. And we get often the feedback of, a lot of what you share, I understand, but either I haven't heard and thought about it in a while, or I haven't heard it spoken about in that angle and then that experience, which then also leads to one of our values of our podcast of we want to cover some of the same questions with guests, but you get different responses because they're different leaders on different areas and on different points of their journey, which is incredibly important for the viewers and for us because we're all on a different point in our own journeys, right? So again, I just so appreciative of it, but your encouragement all along the way has been like, it gives me fuel. You all do not know how much your feedback, your comments, your questions, sometimes even your direct challenges of like, hey, in the next episode, go here, ask this question, or when you have a guest, because I don't know if I agree with that particular angle of the conversation. Or Mike, can you go a little deeper here? You touched on it, or a guest brought something up and Mike, you didn't go to the next level with it because boy, that was a great dialogue. So your interactions with us matter because it helps us guide the conversations. And we've had over 100,000 listens on all platforms now. I was just looking the other day of someone asked me about like, what's your most visited countries outside of the US? And obviously there's heat maps. The US is greater than every other country. The Midwest is greater than every other region, and Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana are greater than every other state. But there are countries that sway based on guests that we have, based on their influences and their experiences and their networks. And we've had, it's 130 plus countries that at least one person at one time stumbled across an episode, which just blows me away. Just blows me away. So again, I thank you all for listening and for tuning in and providing us questions and content that we can just keep moving on. Year 7, season 3. It's just been a really fun journey. So, and we're excited that we're just getting started on this journey. You referenced the tools. So you mentioned a podcast episode. Occasionally we will build tools that come out of episodes that align to that episode that we believe is a good tool for leaders to take from that episode. So you mentioned the 2x2s. Are there any other tools that you have found helpful on the platform or any other resources that you've been able to take back or your team's been able to take back and use?
Well, there's so much depth to this whole leadership conversation that just about every TMI module or podcast or somebody that you're listening to brings something new for us to think about. But the 2x2s definitely kind of push the envelope for us. A couple of our other team members used it as well. But mostly it's the whole philosophy, right? Like it's the philosophy of leadership and figuring out what is your style and what is your concept of leadership and how are you going to mold that concept that best works for the team that you're serving. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like all of what I've learned through TMI and the Unconventional podcast is all goes towards that area of leadership. So while I don't have specific examples, I feel like every nuance of leadership is touched in some manner that I'm able to reflect, and hopefully those listening are able to reflect to sort of cater to their personality and their style. But again, I think at the end of the day, it's all about balance. Mm-hmm. It's all about balance, and it's about not getting swayed, not being too hot, not being too cold about any one topic, but using all of that to strengthen what you consider as your leadership style.
So one of the hardest parts about podcasting is the moment you stop talking. I mean, think about it. The majority of the work that you probably put into creating a podcast is in the editing phase. So what if you didn't have to do the editing phase? Here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help you just come in and talk. We do all the rest. We have the cameras, we have the microphones, we have the lights, and then we have the editing tools to create the perfect content out of your podcast. Not only do you get the full podcast in video and audio, you also get short form content that you can use across all of your pages in social media. So if you want to learn more, go to CincinnatiPodcastStudio.com/tour to learn more and schedule your tour with us today.
Yeah, you and I, as we were talking and even prepping the other day, just briefly hopping on a quick call and touching base, the balance, and we were referencing like the swinging of what we would consider the swinging of the pendulum. Like when you're on a leadership journey, you are starting at the point that you are. And by the way, everyone on your team is on a different point of their journey. So therefore, this is not a race to the finish line. You said it's continuous. The journey continues for as long as we lead and bring life and connection into the world. So therefore, this is just a journey, right? The beautiful thing is we need to be on the journey of improvement, of self-awareness, of learning, of dialogue, of compassion and empathy, of effective directness, which is what you tapped on earlier. So when individuals say, I want to learn about team member effectiveness, I want to increase my team's effectiveness. Great. Where is everyone on your team in their journey? I don't know. I've never thought about that. Okay, awesome. Where are you on your journey? Well, I'm a great leader. And I know I'm self-aware and this, that, and the other. And then it's like, okay, great. Let's go talk to your team about that. Let's see where you are. Let's figure out and let's start your journey pathway, right? Which has been TMI's approach. Let's build pathways. Let's build journeys. Let's connect. And we say configure, our clients say customize to where they are, meet them where they are, and understand where they want to go and work with them to get there, right? And by the time we get here, things have adjusted again, right? So like the plan always adjusts because the plan always adjusts. And I say that there is no nirvana in your leadership journey. You're not going to reach the point where it's like, I'm the best leader and I need to do nothing else because I'm just so effective and everybody knows it and everybody wants that. We're all on a journey together and we're all somewhere. So when you listen to the episode, like, oh, I've never thought about that, or I think about that all the time, but I don't think about this topic. Great. Welcome to the journey of leadership, right? So I love how you put that. We're on a journey. It's continuous. Do you want to talk a little bit about anything additional on the swinging that can create imbalance if we adjust too fast or too often in our leadership journeys?
Yeah. So a couple things come to mind when I talk about balance, and maybe one thing for leaders that we like and we're proud of is the fact that we are very positive. I think generally leaders tend to have a positive outlook about things, even in the most difficult of situations, right? So that's something that is sort of, it's a characteristic you will see in most leaders is being positive. And again, I'll just put myself out there, is early on, I took pride in the fact that I could just see the positive in everything. That's great. I mean, that is what leaders are supposed to do, and which is all well and good. But what I've realized is that you need a healthy dose of cynicism in you in order to be aware of what's happening around you. And so again, that balance of, it's great to be positive, and that's what we strive for day in and day out, but a healthy dose of cynicism is really not a bad thing. Again, it's what you do with that cynicism and how you address it and how you approach it. Obviously, that's what's important, but that balance of, yes, I can look at a positive in every single thing. However, I can also see what the challenges are in that situation because I'm not the only one looking at it. Everybody around me is looking at it too. And if I cannot figure out what some of them are looking at and saying, well, that's really not a good idea because I see this, that, and if I'm not able to look at that and understand that, my healthy, positive outlook is not very well balanced. So I feel like that's the same conversation with empathy too. Empathy, absolutely. We need to have it. We need to offer it. We need to be surrounded by it. But just a slightly healthy dose of realism. We cannot be so empathetic that our team members just aren't performing, and we continue to be empathetic without offering positive, without offering constructive criticism. That is not going to help them in the long term.
Right.
Now, again, there's a manner in which to do it, but a balance of empathy, but then also really caring about the individual enough that you're willing to say, hey, Mike, you may want to think about how you approach this issue. You may want to think about doing it a different way the next time, because here's what it did to everybody around you. To me, that is still empathy. It's just in a longer perspective. So balance to me is it's not always one way. Don't jump on the next bandwagon. It's very difficult to do. Still kind of reflect back and think, how can I balance that viewpoint with what's going to be needed in the long term?
Yeah. Yeah. That is often we hear exactly what you just shared from leaders who are struggling with these topics. That unfortunately, again, it can become out of balance if you swing too far, right? And then all of a sudden, it's almost like everything around, specifically even the self-care journey, around like the mental well-being, mental health, can now be used at times as an excuse. I'm very careful with my words here because there are components that we need to listen to and we need to be understanding and we need to just have knowledge of. So when we started talking a lot about well-being and mental health in the workplace, for the majority, workplaces were not even thinking about it. So we're saying, ask the next question. Ask the follow-up why before taking an action to understand, is there something going on that I need to be aware of, either with an individual or with a team or with an entire function in an organization? That's that self-awareness. What's actually going on? Where are people? However, we have to be careful that things are not swung so far that in the state of everyone's well-being, we no longer get any work done. Right, and get things accomplished. And it's a challenge that we hear often by CEOs, by presidents, by executive directors, by functional leaders who are like, Mike, I'm listening and I'm trying to understand I get it, that we need to be careful and we need to be thoughtful and we need to be intentional and we need to talk about one-on-one leadership. But I also have to it can't be that nobody shows up to work. And I don't want to say that even that pendulum, that comment may not be everyone doesn't show up to work. It may just be one person consistently has excuses. And I want to hear their excuses as real excuses, not as, make-believe. But where do we draw a line? And the answer is back to, have we built trust with that person where we can be direct? And sometimes we just have to be direct. But if we also have a high sense of trust built, we can honestly lean into that discussion and say, we're trying to work with you. We're trying to support you. We've provided resources for you. We've provided, maybe the job isn't the right fit because of these things that it's creating, and or the team that you're on needs you to show up in a different way, right? So at some point there is a line, and that's where I think in our develop module, we talk a lot about individuals innately want to experience change, challenge, and growth. All of us seek some level of change, meaning that change can be a very good thing. It's not all negative. Right? There are organizations that are some of the highest performing organizations in the world who consistently create change just to keep the growth and development of their employees at the highest level of performance. It's actually science. I believe that individuals enjoy challenges. We enjoy to face a challenge and to figure out how to overcome them. Sometimes those challenges create greater emotional reaction that we have to internalize and figure out. And then obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, people enjoy growth. They enjoy going from where they started to some next level, whatever next level is. Not to say we're chasing the corporate ladder, but we do want growth. We want to take on new work challenges and new team challenges and new personal challenges and grow and become a future self. So that's all true. And yet, in all of that, we need directness. I've had some individuals, including advisors on this podcast, who have said, you are not listening and you need to listen. And here's what we're trying to say, specifically Lynn Rule. I remember having a conversation, and Lynn is an expert at communications. She had built so much trust with me that she could tell me anything she wanted as direct as she wanted it. Right. And I remember being in a conversation in our family business and her looking to me and saying, you are not listening. You've got to work on that. But my cup was so overflowing with trust with her that she could take some deposits, and it connected. And I was like, oh, she also is the one who led me through my first Myers-Briggs experience, which is an assessment tool. And she was able to describe the positives and the negatives, the watch-outs and the strengths of my natural personality and demeanor. I remember I remember the conference room I was in, and I remember the discussion that we had when she broke it out. And I was like, oh, that's why right? That's why there's some great things I can bring to the table. And it's also why I need other people around me to complement my areas of weakness or my areas of overusing my strength. Again, that openness, that vulnerability. But it takes time. It takes trust. It takes not swinging too far. And I think it's a great dialogue for us all to think about as we're working through our own leadership and our own team dynamics. And where could I be a little bit more direct? Your point earlier was at one point you were naturally direct, which is a profound strength because a lot of people are not. They go years without learning how to actually say what needs to be said. So therefore, there's, if you're on that journey, that's a strength that I'm just trying to build more direct because I get afraid of what could happen if I'm too direct. Well, lean into it, learn that conflict and communications, it's okay to have conflict. It's okay to communicate through the conflict. We all become better because of it. So I'd like to ask you a little bit about your team, going into a bit more around I'm going to say the word team effectiveness and how you're seeing your team show up after consistency of development, consistency of skill development, of personal development, of soft skill development. How does it look today versus maybe how it looked 3.5 years ago?
Well, we are constantly growing. And as you said before, today where we are with the team members specifically isn't the same team members we had 4 years ago. People move on, people make other decisions. So it's one of those challenges where you've agreed to some core values that's important for your organization. And how do you carry that through the years with team members coming in, team members leaving? So, and that's been the case for us too, is how do we keep that base, those principles that we truly believe in, how do we keep that together as we grow? I've been fortunate that a majority of my leadership team has been with us through that journey, through my journey, through their personal journeys, which is always just so critical in continuity and moving things forward. So that's been really great for us. But then what we've also done is, as part of our onboarding efforts, again, with a lot of guidance from your team, is we ask questions specifically surrounding our core values. And people in interviews, you can figure out if this is somebody that is going to work well with your team, not based on their technical expertise, but what they truly believe in. And so we've kind of wrapped that around us. And as I said before, our leadership team has invested a lot of time in self-reflection, self-awareness. We have a lot of conversations surrounding those every time we get together. We openly talk about difference in opinions. In fact, in our monthly leadership team meetings, we have parts of our agenda where people have to offer different points of view about something, and we walk out of that meeting respecting those points of view. We don't have to agree with it.
Right.
We don't have to agree with it, but we certainly respect and understand that other point of view. So I feel like our team has come a long way, and hopefully the new folks joining our team come in knowing that these are the expectations and these are our core values, and here's what we believe in and here's what we intend to do. And so being intentional again in who we allow into the team has worked out really well for us. But as an organization, we certainly have grown. I truly believe that we now function as one team as opposed to within our silos. And again, we've always done that on the technical side. We were forced to work with across departments and across with our team members. We're forced to do that on the technical side. But then when it comes to functioning as one team internally, I feel like we have really stepped into that now, and we're seeing the fruits of that labor now. The seeds that were sowed several years ago is coming to fruition now.
So let's go into that a little bit more, because that's a dynamic. You're working better as one team now. I love how you put that we were working from a competency perspective because we had to, which means the alignment of all of the human engagement may have been lacking, like the relationship building, the trust building, the connectivity, the chemistry of the group, the culture of the organization wasn't the key priority at the time. As you reference a point in time, competency, people had to function to get things accomplished. But walk me through a little bit more about that one team. I think that's a really profound statement that you just provided that I'd like to unpack with our listeners.
So we really started several years ago with, let's go back and revisit our vision, our mission, our core values as a full team and figure out what that needs to be. Does it need to be what it has been for a while? Do we need to change certain things? So what we did is we had, and some of these things, again, Mike, is something you really have to think about whether this is a top-down approach or should this really be a bottoms-up approach. And when it comes to vision, mission, core values, obviously the more you engage your entire team, the better it is in terms of implementation. So we had a small committee of folks that got together and helped, again, from the ground up, create that vision, mission, and core values that we as an organization had. So that really, I think, pulled it together for us because while they were having conversations as a committee, they were taking it back to their teams and saying, hey, this is what we're talking about. What do you think? And talk it out. And then finally come back together and say, okay, after 6 months or 1 year worth of discussion, here's where we're going to go as a full team. So that is just one example, I think, of how we have grown. We also have times where that's just not possible, where you're working on certain things where you just cannot pull a full team together. But anything that has any long-term impact probably needs a certain level of involvement from not just you, not just your leadership team, but your entire organization or company needs to come together around that.
I want to encourage you to reach out to us via LinkedIn. If you don't follow myself or our organization, Talent Magnet Institute, I encourage you to click follow, send me a LinkedIn invitation. Let's connect and take conversations to a next level. And I believe one of the outputs is that you created an organizational mission, vision, and values and how we operate. But there's also a little bit of functional, like their mission statement of our function that came out of that too, which I think is really awesome.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, we had one of our leadership team members take the vision mission that we have for the organization and work with her specific team and come up with, okay, now I am in this area of expertise. How does that really apply to my area of work?
Yes.
And I think that probably connected with that team, to be honest, a lot more than the organizational stuff, because there's a lot of things in there that not every team member deals with every day.
Yeah.
We as leaders might, but those that are trying to get the work done on a day-to-day basis, it's a slightly different environment for them. So connecting our vision mission to their specific day-to-day,
Yes.
how does that impact my day-to-day, I think was a huge accomplishment.
Yes. And it creates an amazing amount of engagement, because now as the individuals who are accomplishing every week, we know how that ties in. Like what you just outlined is the goal for every organization with mission, vision, and values, that it doesn't just sit, that it's actually inside of every function that rolls up, and also every individual who participates can see themselves and how their work ties into the overall, which you just so eloquently described. Like, again, not many reach that level, because many are sitting here frustrated of, we just don't operate like we say we want to. Or you have individuals who say, oh, of course we're operating like we say we want to, who don't have that level of cynicism or openness to saying, do we really? Have we asked our team? So what you just heard as a part of this discussion is how that cascaded from everyone up. But I also know that as leaders, your leadership team created the strategy to effectively enable that behavior to happen, and then created the trust. Like what you mentioned earlier was that it could take 6 months or 12 months to reconvene. You literally do that. You give your team time to work on this. But I also know that your team, your leadership is checking in to make sure that project's actually in the priority set for those functions. So it's not just we waited a year. It's no, they're like, we're actually working through it as a group, and you're giving them space, and the outcomes are so much more phenomenal when you take this approach. Right?
Absolutely.
And what you're describing, I'm trying to unpack for the listener, because like it's almost like this is a masterclass on some of the things that we want to talk about, and it's just inspiring to see how important everyone is to the overall journey. Changes everything in organizational effectiveness. That's organizational effectiveness. That's leading well. That's leading with heart and achieving strategic plans. That's how you're doing what you're doing. When I hear the volume in which your team performs, the amount of requests and demands and timelines, and we're talking about really important priorities that if your team doesn't move on effectively could stop, hundreds of millions of dollars of development work, possibly billions. I don't know. I don't want to overstate, but I know what's going on in our community, and they're massive undertakings. And your team has to keep, you are the foundation, because nothing starts unless your team provides what's needed to provide to amplify approval. Is that accurate?
That is, and we take that very seriously from a customer service standpoint. We talk about it all the time about being a regulatory agency means that you have to say no a lot of times.
A lot, yeah.
And people don't really want to hear that because they want to get their project done. But one of our core values is integrity, which means we don't turn a blind eye, or we cannot say, well, you're fine here, but not there. And we don't discriminate based on what your project is or who you are, or we come at it the exact same way. So our team really has to function at a high level to handle all of the projects that come across our hallway. But again, I feel like for any organization, any company, once you have your core values strongly embedded into the network of your day-to-day operations, it's just something that then comes naturally to folks. They don't have to think about it because that's built into our DNA now, and this is just how we function.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for being a part of this episode. Thank you for your amazing leadership, your friendship, your partnership. Sharmili, you've at times, as I mentioned earlier, when Lynn Rule was like, Mike, you're not listening. There have been points in our journey where you've called me and said, hey, Mike, I need to give you some really important feedback. That feedback, for those who receive it, again, it's paramount to our growth and how we change and how we think. So you have dramatically impacted our ability to provide the level of quality in which we're trying to provide today to the clients we serve. But it's also encouraged us to even do more. Like, we know we have to grow. So you've given me direct feedback that's helped me really grow and push our team to perform at new heights. So I even want to thank you for that. As leaders, you never know where that direct feedback, if you're thinking it and you believe that it will benefit the individual on the receiving end of this feedback. What I have to do is ensure I've built enough trust that when I deliver it, that benefit can be heard and accepted. And again, you've done a profound job of that with the leaders on your team. You've done a profound job of that even with partners who come alongside of you. So I greatly appreciate and thank you for that.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me. And of course, likewise, I feel like our partnership has helped not just me grow as a leader, but also our organization grow in terms of what we do for the community. So thank you for what you do and what you've done for us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for being a part of this week's episode of the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. We hope today's lessons learned help you move in your journey of unlocking your potential and the potential of your team. We look forward to hearing from you in the comments and through LinkedIn messages or emails. We learn from you. Let us know what you want us to continue to help draw out in these conversations to guide you on your journeys. We want to thank the Cincinnati Podcast Studio for doing the awesome work of bringing this to you live and in video form. If you're listening to this episode and you wish, where can I go to watch the video? Hop over to Spotify, hop over to YouTube to also be able to watch these videos. Subscribe, comment, leave a review, share with your friends and colleagues, and we look forward to connecting with you on the next episode.